Hello, I'm Jerry. I reside in Columbus, Ohio. It may not be the largest or most renowned city in the nation, but it holds a special place in my heart. At 35, I can confidently say that football has been the center of my universe for the majority of my life. From my childhood, I immersed myself in the game, and by the time I reached my 20s, I had become a pivotal member of our local semi-pro team. I may not have had the talent to turn pro, but my passion for the game kept me playing. I held the title of captain, a seasoned veteran, the one who had endured the longest journey. Throughout the years, I have guided numerous younger players in discovering their roles within the team. That's how I came to know Richard. When Richard joined, he was a decade my junior. An exceptional midfielder brimming with immense potential. Upon his initial arrival, he appeared anxious, somewhat awkward in his surroundings. I guided him through the process, ensuring he felt at home. We developed a strong bond, becoming good friends despite the difference in our ages. Before long, Richard had transformed from a mere novice into something much more significant. He stood out as one of our top performers. It came as no shock when scouts from Italy recognized the talent. One day, he received an enticing proposal from Torino, a genuine European club. It was a dream realized for him, and I felt a true sense of joy for the young one. However, I must admit, when he departed, it felt as though a piece was absent. Katie, Richard's mom, was a familiar face I encountered frequently. She would often attend our games, occasionally offering her cheers from the sidelines. I had visited their home on several occasions as well. Richard would extend an invitation for coffee, while Katie consistently ensured there was something to nibble on. She possessed a poise that was truly captivating. Consistently composed. Consistently exuding a calm assurance. It's lovely, indeed, even if I hadn't considered it from that perspective before. She was merely the mother of Richard. That was my perception of her. Then, one fateful night, everything transformed. It was a Tuesday, an ordinary evening like any other. As I sat at home, engrossed in football highlights on my phone, the tranquility was abruptly shattered by the sound of my ringtone. I picked up my phone and noticed a name on the screen that took me by surprise. Katie. For a brief moment, I paused before responding. "Hey, Jerry," she said, her voice slightly wavering. "Could you help me with something?" Naturally, I responded without thinking. "Hello there. I require transportation." That took me by surprise. "Care for a ride?" "Absolutely, I wouldn't bring it up if it weren't significant. I simply need to return home." Her voice carried an unmistakable quality. A tremor. As if tears had stained her cheeks. I straightened my posture. "Where might you be?" I inquired. She provided me with the name of a restaurant in the downtown area. An elegantly refined establishment. I refrained from asking questions. "I will arrive in 10 minutes. As I arrived, I spotted Katie waiting by the curb. She wore a sleek black dress. Her hair was impeccably styled, yet her expression betrayed a sense of disarray. She stood with her arms firmly crossed over her chest, her eyes locked onto the ground. I lowered the window. "Katie." She glanced up, taken aback, then exhaled softly and swung the door open, settling into the passenger seat. "Thank you for being here," she whispered. "Absolutely fine." I cast a fleeting look in her direction. "Are you all right?" She emitted a humorless chuckle. "Not quite." I delayed getting behind the wheel initially. I simply remained patient, allowing her the time to collect her thoughts. At last, she let out a deep sigh and rested her head against the seat. "I went on a date," she confessed. I blinked. I didn't anticipate her response at all. A moment in time. Indeed. First to arrive. Honestly, I can't even say how much time has passed. She released a sardonic laugh. It turned out to be a complete catastrophe. I scowled. What transpired? She gave a slight shake of her head. He exhibited a sense of superiority. Self-centered. He spent the whole night discussing his own experiences. And when I came to the conclusion that my interest had waned, she paused, her fingers gripping her lap more firmly. He became quite insistent. That caused my jaw to tighten. In what way do you mean pushy? She gestured with a hand wave. It's not a big deal. He simply refused to grasp the subtlety. Continued to urge me to consider giving him an opportunity. I released my breath gradually, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Did he lay a hand on you? Her eyes met mine, a look of astonishment crossing her face. No. Nothing quite like that. However, it was simply disheartening. She shook her head, gazing out the window. I don't know why I even bothered, she murmured. Dating at my age feels like a farce. It seems that either the men in my age group are seeking someone younger, or they simply have that tendency. I was at a loss for words in response to that. I certainly didn't consider myself an authority on dating. It had been years since I experienced a serious relationship. Perhaps you simply haven't encountered the right individual yet. I extended my offer. Katie offered me a faint, melancholic smile. Perhaps. We lingered in quietude for a brief moment before I eventually began to drive. Would you like me to drive you directly home? I inquired. After a moment of uncertainty, she gave a slight nod. Indeed. Home sounds appealing. The journey unfolded in silence for a time. The city lights whirled past in a haze. I caught fleeting glimpses of her from time to time. Despite the weariness reflected in her gaze, she remained captivating. I hadn't truly observed that before. Perhaps I simply never allowed myself to see. After a brief pause, she let out another sigh. Have you ever experienced the sensation that? I'm not sure, it feels as if life has just slipped away from you. She inquired. The inquiry struck me with more intensity than I had anticipated. Indeed, I acknowledged it. I certainly do. She pivoted her gaze, observing me intently. Your attention was consistently drawn to football. Have you ever considered the idea of establishing roots? I wore a sly grin. I simply didn't have the time for it. She gently shook her head. And now? I simply shrugged. It seems I've grown accustomed to my solitude. She paused in silence for a moment. Then, with a hint of reluctance, she replied, Me too. I drove into her driveway. With a sigh, she extended her hand toward the door handle. Then, just before she stepped out, she hesitated. Jerry. Indeed. She cast her gaze in my direction. And for the first time that night, a smile graced her lips. Step inside. Enjoy a cup of coffee. I paused. Only for a moment. Then I gave a slight nod. Indeed, I did. Understood. Stepping into Katie's home carried an odd sense of familiarity, despite the fact that I had never entered without Richard by my side. The aroma was a blend of rich coffee and a subtle hint of flowers. Perhaps it was her fragrance or a candle she had lit. Settle in, she suggested, as she removed her heels. She entered the kitchen, her movements fluid and effortless, as if she were familiar with this space from countless visits prior. I took a seat at the kitchen table. The space was tidy yet had a sense of warmth and history. A handful of framed photographs rested on a nearby shelf, predominantly featuring Richard, along with a few vintage family snapshots. I came across a childhood photo of Richard, perhaps around 5 years old, clutching a soccer ball that was almost as large as he was. Katie must have noticed my gaze because she let out a soft chuckle. He was utterly captivated by that ball. She remarked, pouring the coffee. Transported it with me at all times. There were times I even drifted off with it by my side. A smile crossed my lips. I'm not at all surprised by that. She placed a mug before me and took a seat on the opposite side of the table. For a few moments, we simply lingered, savoring the ease of our quietude. Then she released a deep breath. You know, she began, stirring her coffee with a distracted air. I once believed that by this age, I would have everything in life sorted out. I arched an eyebrow, and she responded with a sly smile. It appears that I do not. A brief chuckle escaped me. Absolutely, I understand. She inclined her head. Are you? I simply shrugged. I have dedicated a significant portion of my life to the pursuit of football. That encompassed everything I knew. As I reflect on my life now that I've gained some years, I notice that I haven't truly constructed much beyond that point. She observed me intently for a brief moment. No committed partnerships. I gently shook my head. I simply didn't have the time for it. She wore a sly grin. That's what Richard frequently mentions. Indeed, he is quite youthful. He has plenty of time ahead of him. What about you? For a brief moment, I paused before responding. I'm uncertain. It seems I've become accustomed to solitude. Katie paused, her fingers tracing the edge of her mug with a gentle touch. Then she let out a deep sigh. She acknowledged that sensation. I cast a quick look in her direction. Indeed. She gave a slight nod. Once Richard's father departed, I dedicated myself entirely to nurturing him. I wasn't focused on dating, I hardly considered myself at all. And now, out of nowhere, I'm 48 and it feels as though I've overlooked something significant. Her voice carried a certain rawness. Something delicate. You didn't overlook anything, I mentioned. You have nurtured an exceptional young man. That's something significant. She offered me a faint smile. Thank you. It would certainly be pleasant, to have someone around. I found myself at a loss for words in response to that. I simply nodded, savoring another sip of my coffee. Our conversation continued from there. Concerning Richard. Regarding the sport of football. Reflecting on the transformations unfolding across the globe. How individuals have changed from what they once were. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly, smooth and organic. And before I realized it, the clock on the wall indicated it was well past midnight. Katie caught my eye and released a gentle chuckle. Incredible. I was completely unaware of how late it had gotten. Indeed. I remarked, extending my limbs slightly. I ought to consider. It would be best if you remained. I blinked. Excuse me? She paused for a brief moment. Then offered a subtle, nearly bashful smile. It's late, she remarked plainly. There's no reason to head home at this moment. Feel free to stay in the guest room. I gazed at her, attempting to decipher the unspoken words. Yet her expression remained serene, nonchalant. Yet, there was an unmistakable quality to the moment that set it apart. I didn't give it much thought. I simply nodded. Very well, I replied. I will remain. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee roused me from my slumber the following morning. I blinked as the gentle morning light streamed through the window. For a brief instant, I needed to ground myself in my surroundings. I rose from my slumber, extended my limbs, and made my way into the kitchen. Katie stood by the stove, expertly flipping pancakes. She pivoted at the sound of my presence. Good morning, she said with a smile. Good morning, I replied. She waved her hand toward the counter. The coffee is prepared. I picked up a mug and savored a sip. It had a robust quality, precisely how I preferred it. Text, you really didn't need to go through all this trouble, I remarked, gesturing toward the pancakes. She gave a slight shrug. You spent the night. It just felt appropriate. I rested against the counter, observing her for a brief moment. The scene had an effortless quality that felt entirely organic. Quite ordinary. And yet, it felt anything but normal. I found myself uncertain about the sensation. Yet, there was one certainty I held. A shift had occurred in what we shared. Several days had gone by since that evening at Katie's. I was caught off guard by the overnight stay, and waking up to pancakes and coffee felt as effortless as breathing. Yet, the thoughts have lingered in my mind ever since. Alone in my apartment, I couldn't help but revisit our conversations in my mind. The manner in which she recounted her past, her solitude, lingered in my mind. She was more than merely Richard's mother. She was a woman who had dedicated years to prioritizing the needs of others. For the first time in ages, she felt a desire for something that was truly her own. I was uncertain about what this connection meant for us, yet there was one thing I was certain of. Katie was worthy of feeling extraordinary. She deserved a partner who recognized her true self, rather than merely viewing her as a mother. As I pondered the idea further, it became increasingly clear to me that I aspired to embody that man. But how does one even begin to tackle something like this? It was never solely about my own experience. Richard was a dear companion of mine. If this were to ever materialize, it would have an impact on him as well. I was completely uncertain about his reaction. Yet, I was certain of one thing. I longed to see Katie once more. I reached for my phone, paused briefly, and then dialed her number. Her response came in nearly an instant. "Hello, Jerry." I clear my throat. "Hello, I was curious if you would be interested in joining me for dinner." A moment of stillness. Then, her tone became gentler. "Similar to an outing." I let out a breath, a chuckle escaping me. "Absolutely, similar to a date." Yet another moment of stillness. Then, she released a soft, amused laugh. "I would absolutely enjoy that." A smile crept across my face. "Excellent. I will collect you at 7 o'clock. 7 is just right." On the evening of our date, I arrived at her house, a swirl of anticipation and anxiety coursing through me. This was uncharted ground for us both. I aimed for it to be flawless. As she emerged from the house, I found myself momentarily lost in the rhythm of my own breath. She donned a deep blue dress that perfectly accentuated her silhouette. Her hair cascaded in gentle waves. She had always possessed a captivating beauty. However, this evening, she captivated everyone with her beauty. I stepped out of the car to hold the door open for her. "Incredible," I uttered, unable to restrain myself. "You appear absolutely stunning." She smiled, a delicate flush warming her cheeks. "Thanks, Jerry." I brought her to a cozy, charming eatery in the neighborhood. It may not have been extravagant, but it offered delightful cuisine and a serene, intimate ambience. We settled at a table by the window, and as we took our seats, I observed the calmness that enveloped her. It was as if she truly found her ease. "This is lovely," she remarked, her fingers gliding over the edge of her wine glass. I acknowledged with a nod. "Indeed, it is." In the initial moments, our conversation revolved around uncomplicated topics. How her week unfolded. What I had been engaged in. However, the dialogue took a turn, and suddenly we found ourselves delving into more profound topics once more. She shared additional details about Richard's father. How he had never truly existed in that space. How she had mastered the art of self-sufficiency. I shared with her my personal challenges. Football had been everything to me, and as I grew older, uncertainty loomed over what the future held. She absorbed every word, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on me. At one moment, she let out a deep sigh, her head shaking in disbelief. I once believed that all the good men had disappeared. At this stage in my life, it feels futile to even entertain the notion of hope. I furrowed my brow. "Did you genuinely believe that?" She offered a gentle smile. "I certainly did. However, at this moment, I believe I may have been mistaken." The way she expressed it sent my heart into a frenzy. As I extended my arm over the table, I gently clasped her hand in my own. She remained close. "Katie?" I spoke, my voice softer now. "I'm uncertain about the direction this is taking. However, I am certain that I wish to discover more." She clasped my hand softly. "Same here." In that instant, a change occurred in the dynamic between us. This transcended mere friendship. This was truly something genuine. I found myself captivated by Katie. It was an undeniable truth now. It transcended mere attraction or the moments we shared. It went beyond the surface. She stirred emotions within me that had long been dormant. Something genuine. Something that inspired me to strive for improvement in myself. Yet, despite my deep desire for this, an unsettling thought lingered at the back of my mind. Richard. Katie was no ordinary woman. She was the mother of my closest friend. Richard was more than just an acquaintance to me. He was an individual I held in high regard. A person I had guided. A person I regarded as a younger sibling. I felt it was essential to speak with him before making any progress with Katie. One evening, I found myself on the couch, gazing at my phone as time seemed to stretch on endlessly. I found myself uncertain about how to approach the topic. Yet, I understood that it was necessary. With a steadying breath, I pressed the call button at last. After a few rings, Richard picked up, his voice as cheerful as ever. "Hello, Jerry. It's been a while, my friend. How is life treating you these days?" I managed a laugh. "It's quite enjoyable. Hey, there's something important I want to discuss with you." A silence lingered on the other end. "That seems quite significant." "Indeed, it is." I let out a slow breath. "It's regarding your mother." Stillness. At that moment, Richard let out a hearty laugh. "Very well, my interest has been piqued. What about my mother?" After a moment of uncertainty, I finally spoke my mind. "I've been enjoying moments with her, and I believe I'm developing feelings for her." A stillness enveloped the line for a brief moment. My heart raced. Then, Richard spoke, his tone more buoyant than I anticipated. "Jerry, is that truly what has you so agitated?" I scowled. "Well, she's your mother, you know." I had no desire to. Jerry interrupted me, his tone now genuine. "You've always been someone I admire, haven't you noticed? During our time playing together, you were more than just an experienced player. I viewed you as my leader, my guide. In many ways, you embodied the role of a father figure in my life." I blinked, taken by surprise. Richard pressed on, "And you're concerned about my opinion? Honestly, if there's anyone who truly deserves to be with my mom, it's definitely you." I exhaled softly. I was completely unaware of what I was grasping. "Are you truly sincere about that?" "Absolutely," he replied without a moment's pause. "My mother has dedicated her entire life to nurturing and supporting me. She truly deserves someone who will genuinely care for her this time. If you happen to be that person, my joy knows no bounds." I ran my fingers through my hair, experiencing a blend of relief and an emotion akin to gratitude. "Thank you," I said, my voice now softer. "Just make me one promise," Richard added. "Everything. Show her the respect she deserves." A smile graced my lips. "I give you my promise." Following that discussion, a transformation occurred within me. The final trace of uncertainty, the last fragment of hesitation, had vanished. Richard's blessing instilled in me the bravery to finally take the steps I should have taken from the start. When I next encountered Katie, I didn't merely behave as if we were two individuals who had experienced a shared moment. I revealed to her the depth of my feelings for her. I invited her out more often, ensuring she felt cherished. I sent her flowers, texted her good morning and good night, and ensured she felt my thoughts were with her. Gradually, I began to notice how she started to place her trust in us. One evening, following a serene dinner at her home, she gazed at me with a fresh intensity in her eyes, something that conveyed this was more than a mere momentary bond. She extended her hand toward mine, bridging the distance between us at the table. "Jerry, do you really believe this is the right choice? Who we are?" I acted without a moment's pause. "Katie, I have never felt more certain about anything in my life." In that instant, I realized this was more than merely the start of something extraordinary. This was the genuine article. This night was meant to be extraordinary. This is more than just a meal. This is more than just a date. A moment etched in her memory for all time. I meticulously organized every aspect, considering even the tiniest details. A serene, tucked-away eatery on the fringes of the town. A setting where the candles danced with a gentle glow and the music whispered softly, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. I arrived at 7, and as she opened the door, I found myself at a loss for words. Katie was breathtaking. A deep blue dress that embraced her perfectly. Her hair cascaded in gentle waves over her shoulders. Yet, it wasn't solely about her appearance. It was the way she held herself. With elegance. With a gentle embrace. With a serene elegance that initially captured my heart. Incredible. I inhaled deeply, unable to conceal my awe. She chuckled, a touch bashful yet radiant. You certainly present yourself quite nicely, Jerry. The dinner was exquisite. We had a conversation. We shared a moment of laughter. We became enveloped in a dialogue that rendered time inconsequential. As dessert made its entrance, I inhaled deeply. This was the defining moment. I extended my hand over the table. Grasping her hand gently in my own. She raised her gaze. Her gaze sought out my own. Perceiving a shift in the atmosphere. Katie. I began, my voice firm yet imbued with an undercurrent of emotion. I want to share something important with you. She inclined her head ever so slightly. What is it exactly? I let out a breath. I cherish you deeply. She fluttered her eyelids. At one time. 2 times. For a brief moment, I feared I had surprised her. Yet, a gentle, seemingly incredulous smile appeared on her lips. Jerry, she murmured. I grasped her hand tightly. I truly mean it. This is not merely a fleeting interest for me. You are the essence of it all. I can't bear the thought of a life that doesn't include you. She released a breath she had been holding in. Her eyes sparkled unexpectedly. And then, in such a hushed manner that I nearly missed it. I feel the same way about you. A wave of relief enveloped me. Yet, in an instant, a fleeting expression crossed her features. A moment of uncertainty. There's only one thing to consider. She whispered, her voice trembling. Richard, what will his feelings be regarding this? I mean, you belong to him. I interrupted her with a soft smile. Katie, I've already had a conversation with him. Her breath hitched. He is aware. And he feels joy for us. Absolutely delighted, in fact. I let out a soft laugh. He shared it with me directly. He desires for you to find someone who will cherish you as you truly deserve. She gazed at me intently for what felt like an eternity. Then, she shattered. Not in sorrow. Free from discomfort. Yet in sheer, all-encompassing relief. Emotion surged within her, causing her eyes to glisten. And before she had the chance to hold them back, they cascaded down her cheeks. She released a tremulous chuckle, dabbing at her cheeks. I can hardly believe this, she murmured. I simply never imagined I would experience these feelings once more. And now, it has become a reality. I leaned in, gently wiping away a tear from her cheek with my thumb. It's genuine, I assure you. And for the first time, I perceived it, genuinely perceived it. She was filled with an overwhelming joy. She felt a profound sense of tranquility. Half a year has passed. Life had never seemed so effortless before. Katie and I had taken the step to share a home together. Each morning, I was greeted by the gentle sounds of her bustling in the kitchen. The aroma of coffee wafting gently throughout the home. Each day seemed to hold a promise of excitement and anticipation. Richard had always been incredibly supportive. He would visit on weekends. We would gather to relive classic football matches. Whenever he caught sight of his mom smiling at me, it was evident. He felt a true sense of joy for her. One evening, while we lounged on the couch, Katie curled up against me. She murmured, "Do you ever reflect on how everything unfolded?" I looked down at her, my fingers weaving through her hair. "Could you clarify what you mean?" She beamed softly against my chest. The way everything fell into place. In what way? Had even a single detail changed, our paths may never have crossed. I contemplated it, reflecting on the unexpected twists and turns that life has presented. Reflecting on the decisions that brought us to this point. Then, I pressed my lips to the crown of her head, embracing her a bit more closely. I believe I murmured, "Some things are simply destined to happen." As she sighed with satisfaction in my embrace, I understood. This was precisely the place I was destined to be as well. Life is full of surprises. If someone had mentioned to me a year ago that I would find myself in this position, coexisting with Katie, awakening beside the woman I cherish, revealing a journey I never realized I longed for, I would have found it hard to believe you. Yet, here I stand. Reflecting on my past, I understand that this choice stands out as one of the finest I've ever made. I reflect on the origins of it all. A seemingly ordinary visit to an old friend unfolded into an unexpected experience that took me by surprise. What a remarkable conversation. Just a moment. Transformed it all. Falling for Katie was never part of my intentions. I didn't see that coming. Yet, from the very first genuine exchange we shared, I sensed it. The allure. The bond. No matter how hard I attempted to dismiss it initially, it lingered persistently in the background. The doubts linger in my memory. The inquiries. Do you think this would be effective? Would anyone grasp it? Am I making a misstep? Yet, the instant her gaze met mine and she confessed her love for me as well, I understood. The path ahead was irrevocable. Everything aligned perfectly. Richard's response. His backing. The manner in which he expressed that I was the type of man his mother truly deserved. That moment remains etched in my memory. It was the ultimate affirmation that I wasn't merely pursuing an unattainable dream. I was selecting something genuine. And now, after several months, I notice it in the little details. The way Katie beams as she brews her morning coffee. The way she nestles against me while we're engrossed in a show. Her gaze upon me suggests a newfound sense of security. It feels as though she is precisely in her rightful place. I understand that judgment from others is a possibility. There may be those who fail to grasp the concept. Yet, the reality is that love lacks a manual. Things don't always unfold as we envision. At times, it discovers us in the most surprising locations through the most unforeseen individuals. In that moment, we are faced with a decision. Depart due to apprehension. Or embrace an opportunity that might transform our existence for good. I seized that opportunity. I hold no regrets. As you observe this, what actions would you have taken? If you found yourself in my situation, what actions would you have taken? Would you have overlooked your emotions? Did you turn away simply because it was the simpler choice? Or would you have pursued your true desires? Was it worth the gamble? There are times in life when we find ourselves at pivotal junctions. Instances when we must choose between remaining in our comfort zone or daring to venture into uncharted territory. I won't reveal what the correct answer is. Ultimately, the choice rests solely with you. However, if there's a single lesson I've gleaned from this experience, it is this. Occasionally, the most wonderful experiences unfold when you cease to analyze every detail and simply allow your emotions to flow. Perhaps, just perhaps, the love you never anticipated is the very love that was destined for you from the start.